Hello there everybody and welcome to the video. In this one we're going to be looking at the patch notes and designer notes for the upcoming Operation Brutal Swarm, just about to release. A lot to unpack, a lot is changing, and hopefully this video can help you quickly digest what those changes are going to look like. Here we are then inside of the patch notes. First off, Operation Brutal Swarm. Of course, the biggest component to any season is the new operator being added. This time is an attacker by the name of Grim, a 3-speed with the 5.52 secondary hard breach, so very, very aggressive. And his unique ability is the Hive Launcher, a hybrid between Nomad and Lion is probably the easiest way to describe it. You shoot the launcher out, bees then appear, and if you're a defender, you will be revealed, you will be pinged out to the rest of the attacking lineup. Now, I think in isolation, this ability is not going to be super strong, but he does get quite a few of them. I believe it's 5 that may need to be tuned down, as you could really flush out a lot of positions with relative ease. I'm keen to see how this gadget plays out. I get the impression that, kind of like Lion Evolved even, he's probably not going to be amazing in ranked, because a lot of teams don't necessarily have the coordination to play off that. If they do, they might be able to work it into their gameplay well. As for pro play, that's where I think it will be exploited. I could see it maybe being flexed out as a sort of hybrid on any lineup, being a 3-speed, and with the 5.52 he can get work done elsewhere. So this gadget's going to be super interesting. It's going to make a lot of positions more difficult to hold now, as attackers will be able to get that information and apply instant pressure now onto positions. So certainly going to be an interesting gadget, and I think we're going to have to track its sort of strengths and weaknesses and see how well it does perform in the game. Up next is the new gadget being added, the Impact EMP Grenade. You can see here a bunch of operators getting it straight off the bat. Blackbeard, Monty, Dockerby Nook, Gridlock Sledge, Lion, and Ossa. So quite a wide spectrum of operators are getting this gadget. It's a new throwable gadget. It explodes on impacts, deactivates nearby electronic devices. It is a shorter time period than a typical EMP, so Thatcher is not completely dead. However, there's a lot more alternatives now, and I think going forward, if you're still going to be instant banning Thatcher, it's a waste. It's really not going to be all or nothing now with this new gadget. Weapon recoil is also getting adjusted in this patch quite significantly. It's basically being completely overhauled, and as they say in the notes, they're looking to make it more meaningful. You can see the dot points here. So first off the bat, vertical recoil has been reviewed on all weapons and adjusted to match the weapon's expected power level. So if a weapon's more powerful, expect it to have more vertical recoil. The intensity of vertical and horizontal recoil has been increased during sustained fire bursts. The longer the burst, the stronger the recoil, so you can't just hold down, shoot forever, expect the recoil to be the same gradual intensity. It will spike. Limits on weapons with strong recoil have mostly stayed the same. That's self-explanatory. LMGs on weapons with high capacity magazines now have a 4th stage of recoil that's harder to control. So again, trying to reduce the ability for players to just sit, hold angles, or pre-fire around corners for way too long and not give, especially defenders against LMGs, a chance to fight back. And finally, weapons have more attachment options, and that'll be available on console and PC. Nice addition. You can play around with what suits your playstyle, what suits the weapons, etc. Going on from that, recoil on console now works differently compared to PC. In the past, it was adjusted based on values modified for console. Now they're reworking it so it can be a bit more fine-tuned. That's cool. Up next, player protection. I'm not going to focus too much in on this. The focus of this video is more so what are the changes going to do to the meta itself. But nice to see that there's some changes being made, and also good to see that you can now report cheaters in match replay. New permanent map, Stadium 2021, is coming back into the game. It's being added into ranked. A nice addition. It's a mixture of border and coastline. If you want to learn more about the map, you've probably forgotten it at this point, I'll put a card in the corner and you can watch my video on it. I think it has potential to be a pretty fun map in ranked. Maybe could make it into comp. I'm not too sure. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out in this matter. On to player comfort now, and there have been some map ban changes in ranked. So there's now 5 instead of 3 in the phase. You still ban 1 each, and then it randomizes between the remaining 3. That means there'll be a better variety of maps played, but it still does give you some agency as to the maps that you really do not want to play. I think this is a good change, and we'll just have to see how it plays out and what the feedback is on that. Tactical map changes as well, so the maps have just been tidied up a little bit to relay information more effectively, which is also nice. Move on to operator balancing. I think this is going to be more so appropriate when we look at the designer notes, so we'll just skim over this for now. Tweaks and improvements. Hard breach charge, reduced activation time to 4 seconds, so it'll be slightly more effective. Frag grenades. Pretty big change here that's only reduced to a couple of dot points here at least. Maximum radius at which minimum damage is taken is 3.6 meters now, as opposed to 5, and reduced the radius at which maximum damage is taken to 2 meters was 2.5. The TLDR of this is that nades are going to be more challenging to hit, so that's going to increase the skill cap for them, and hopefully will reduce some of that frustration factor that has creeped in with yellow ping, with vertical nades being very, very strong. We could be here all day listing through those, so I'm not going to waste your time. Flash hider, extended barrel, muzzle, compensator, suppressor, vertical grip, angled grip, and laser have also seen changes as to where they have been added. Again, going back to that previous point that the devs want more options available to the player, which I think is nice. The one that stands out as being most important out of these, at least initially, is that the damage penalty on suppressors has been removed. Again, I believe 15% is what your damage was reduced when you had a suppressor equipped. Now, suppressors are going to be very, very strong. Now, some have theorized that you're silly to not run it, meaning that you basically have to run suppressor. I'm not as convinced. I think it'll be a case-by-case basis. If you can control the recoil on a suppressor consistently, you feel fine using it. There's no reason not to now because it hides your trails. You don't get the damage penalty, you may as well. However, I don't think every gun it will be viable. So it's going to be a case-by-case basis. Expect suppressors to creep in more into the meta. But yeah, I think this is going to have to be monitored quite closely. Not too much else to note, just a couple of other minor changes. We'll jump now into the designer notes. All right, here we are then for the preseason designer notes. This is the real nerdy stuff. First up, we have the balancing matrix and top operator bands. This one here is for the attackers, looking at the win delta versus presence. As you can see, the key on the graph, top right, OP too strong, bottom left, underpick too weak, and you can work out the rest. FINKA, of course, way, way ahead of the pack, very, very strong. Combination of the LMG meta and the nade meta being so strong with yellow ping has seen her skyrocket. On to defenders now, and this one's probably not quite as funky as the attackers. It's a little bit more compact, but otherwise still reaching ahead of the pack, above a 50% presence in plat or above, and that's because the Storm with the 1.5 is very, very strong, and she is a 3-speed, but I think this graph is looking fine for the defense. One thing that does stand out is Goyo, underpicked too weak, according to this key. Interesting, considering that he has so much ability to deny areas for a really long period of time, but now that they're not attached to shields, maybe players aren't playing him as optimally as they could. On to the ban rates now, and Thatcher, still, for probably every season the game's been out, way ahead of the pack, 85% banned out. Jackal, second, 56. Not too surprising. Jackal has been changed multiple times, and he's still very frustrating to play against. Thatcher, that's been alleviated a little bit, maybe going forward with impact EMPs coming in. Thatcher's going to be a nice bonus for the attack to have, but it's certainly not as powerful as it once was. And I'd be shocked if this number doesn't go down eventually. Give it a season or two, players will clue on, and we won't see it banned out as much. In terms of defense, Mirror, frequently banned out, frustrating operator to play against. So it's always funny, at least personally, when people say like Velvet Shell was an amazing season, whatever. Well, look at that. 2 operators people consistently ban out for some reason still, like 4 years on later. Valkyrie next out, despite her still being maybe not as strong as she once was. Again, nerfed. Can't throw cameras outside, or you can, but it's 10 seconds. So interesting to see her still up there. Kaid actually frequently banned out too, and that's probably because a lot of maps he is very, very strong. So infer from that what you will. Move on to the actual changes themselves. So weapon balancing, weapon recoil. As we mentioned, separate now in terms of development. Vertical recoil has been increased on all weapons and adjusted to their expected power level. Increased overall recoil on all ARs, all SMGs, all LMGs, machine pistols, and the idea behind this being that recoil needs to be looked at. And we know it's a contentious change, or they say it's a contentious change. However, multiple weapons are described as laser beams. And I think this is correct. You don't have to be very good at controlling recoil to control recoil in this game. I can do it. I suck. It shouldn't be that easy. Adjustments will be made to recoil not only on vertical intensity, but in some cases horizontal, which is nice. Weapons with strong and weak recoil patterns will keep very similar recoils, and we've reviewed each weapon individually based on several different parameters, such as ROF, DPS, and what operators use them. Interesting. Softened recoil overall on the M762, so Zephyr, AR, back in play maybe. Ashar 4C as well, so that's quite intriguing. And then, as expected, increased overall recoil, 6B41, LMGE, G8A1, Spear. So a lot of those high capacity, high damage dealing weapons have had their recoil stepped up, which makes sense. Recoil attachments. These changes can be easily read as buffs, as no options are being taken away, and any combos you've previously liked can still be done. We're hoping with greater selection, especially to help control recoil, will be used especially alongside other changes detailed in these notes. So again, really driving the player to step outside their comfort zone, maybe try some things out and see what works. As is the case though with like any game ever, players are just going to find what's optimal and use that anyway. So we'll see how effective this ends up being and how much variety perhaps there are in some of those setups. I'm not going to go through every single dot point here. It's not really that interesting. The suppressors we mentioned earlier, so damage reduction has been removed, and that will probably mean that we'll see suppressors in play a lot more, because it's taking away a lot of the cons that were associated with them and leaving the pros that already existed. All right, weapon sights. So this one's probably a little bit more interesting compared to attachments themselves. There's been a lot of requests for specific sights on specific weapons. So now operators get access to all magnification options up until their maximums. So for example, Thatcher's L85 previously had access to all the universal 1x sights and only the 2x scope. Now he will also have access to the 1.5. I think when they changed sights initially, they were really keen to try and force this idea that only specific sights for specific guns and use that as a balancing metric. I think they finally waved the white flag a little bit on that. They're going to give players freedom of choice, and I think that's good. And I don't think it's really going to break much. So, as you can see, heaps of different weapons getting a variety of 1.5 and 2x scopes. A few operators will have their maximum magnification options reduced or increased, and this is to try and balance out any spikes that may arise from the previous point. Interesting ones to note are probably Ace AK-12. He loses the 2x, so a really strong high DPS gun will have his 2x taken away. I like that change. Frost is getting the 1.5 back, so that's going to be very interesting, and may see her creep back into the meta a little bit. Kaid also losing 1.5, probably in response to his relatively high ban rate and good strength across the board, but it's really his gadget that makes him strong anyway. As we mentioned before, EMP Impact Grenade is coming into the game. It has a range of 1.8 meters. It lasts for 9 seconds. I think Thatcher is 15, so you can see that there's a significant difference. Frag grenades, this is what we were talking about earlier with the drop-off in damage. The graph illustrates it quite nicely. Blue is what the damage used to be in terms of the range itself. It's been cut down now with that orange line, and it's a lot more linear in which it goes down. Hard breach charge activation time reduced by a second, and this is in response to impact EMPs, with the EMPs disabling electricity sources for 9 seconds and the charge taking 2 seconds to deploy plus 5 seconds to explode. The goal was to increase the window of opportunity So that makes sense. Now we go into the operator balancing. Fuse, reduce duel time to 2 seconds from 3. That's a nice change. Could see Fuse used a little bit more in ranked. Even after his buff where he can place them on reinforced walls, probably hasn't had the impact I think that they would have liked. And having that time reduced a little bit more is a nice change. Carly's now getting 4 charges as opposed to 3. So maybe we'll see her used a little bit more. And with Thatcher maybe dropping off a bit, could see her played, but I don't know why you would want to play her over impact EMPs anyway, so we'll have to wait and see. Guys is getting Claymore as a 3rd gadget. That's a nice addition. Not really going to change ranked or comp too much though. Capitao is getting Gone 6. Capitao's been out of the meta for a really long time now. Maybe with some util clear potential, he could sneak back in. Yana's going to get taken away. I don't think any operator needs Gone 6 plus nades unless they're super hard support. So I like this addition, or this removal rather. FINKA, frag grenades out, smoke grenades in. It's taken a while. It's finally happening. FINKA is probably going to drop off. Still think her ability is quite strong, and her passive allowing teammates to be revived is also very, very strong. But it's going to be a lot more of a deliberate choice now instead of just insta-locking her or insta-banning her every single game. Maverick is also losing frag grenades. They're getting stuns instead. I always found it strange that Maverick had frag grenades. It never really made sense to me considering he's got hard breach, he's 3 speed. He has a lot going for him, a very strong loadout of weaponry as well. So I think that this makes more sense. Try to force Maverick into a little bit more of a supportive role where he probably should have been in the first place. Buck is getting Gone 6. I'm assuming this is trying to bring him in line a little bit more with Sledge after losing his nades. Gone 6 does just offer him a little bit more in terms of util clear potential. Although I don't think there's too many instances where you would be running it over hard breach. It's probably going to be very site specific. So that will conclude this little breakdown. I'm super keen for the new season. I think it is going to be quite good. The recall changes stand out as being really nice. I've played a little bit of the test server. It does feel noticeably different, but it is controllable and there is certainly a higher skill cap to it, which is really, really good to see. New operator Grim looks really interesting. Could be very powerful, but could be useless. I really am finding it hard to read as to where he will sit. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. And I think a lot of the balancing changes across the board are really going to help even out the playing field a little bit. Hopefully the LMG nade meta is slowly going behind us. It's going to probably usher in some sort of new meta. A lot of people theorizing that it might be suppressors. Again, I'm not 100% convinced that will be the case. Whatever it ends up being, I'm excited for it. Stage 3 of comp is going to be exciting as well, especially with quarantine now a thing of the past. But with that said, that will conclude the video. Please like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.